Laura is the only one for me now. So please divorce me.
James said this with a serious expression. I couldn't respond to him right away. I wanted him to come back and not leave us. That's how much I still loved James. I see. I understand. Those were the only words I could manage to say. And so we got divorced. I have been living with my son Brian since then. What? Why now? Then, out of the blue, I received a letter from James, who had chosen Laura. He had passed away in a car accident a month ago. Still, I received a letter from him, and I decided to read it with suspicion.
If something happens to me,
What was written in the letter was shocking to me. This can't be. It can't be true. By the time I finished reading, I was trembling. Then I made a decision. My name is Mary Smith, and I'm a typical 32-year-old working mom. I have a husband, James, who is a year older than me, and our son, Brian.
Mary, you're so good at being considerate.
What?
You know, like when you quietly portion out the food or move the dishes to the side, and you call the waiter at just the right moment.
I met James at a group blind date my friend dragged me to. I've always been bad at asserting myself, so I often take the role of the listener. That time, while everyone else was having a great time, I was just supporting from the sidelines when James talked to me.
Are you bored?
No, it's not that. I'm just not good at talking.
I see. Oh, have you tried this dish? It's really good.
James was so thoughtful and always had a smile on his face. Thanks to him, I managed to enjoy the group blind date.
Would you like to exchange contact information?
We exchanged contact information, quickly became friends, and soon after, he confessed his feelings and we started dating. After a few years of dating, we got married.
He's really cute. How about naming the baby Brian?
I think that's a great idea. Welcome to the world, Brian. Shortly after we got married, I gave birth to Brian. James was the one who chose the name.
I'm really glad I married you, Mary. You make me so happy.
James said that with a smile. I nodded and smiled back at him. I'm happy too, thanks to you, James. I hope this happiness lasts forever. I truly believe that in my heart.
Mom, I finished my homework.
Oh, you already finished. That's amazing. Brian is very smart, just like his dad, James. He's also very diligent with his studies, doing his homework without being told, and often getting help from James. Brian is our pride and joy. However, there are people who don't think well of Brian. They are James' parents, Emily and Robert.
Brian doesn't look much like James. Whose kid is he, anyway?
Emily seems to dislike that Brian looks more like me. Every time we meet, she says this to Brian with a sneer. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Brian is definitely my son. If you keep talking like that, we won't come here anymore.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean any harm.
Of course, neither James nor I could forgive Emily's words. Emily cares a lot about James, so when she realizes he won't visit anymore, she apologizes. But whenever we visit their house, she always makes snide remarks, so she probably hasn't really changed. And then there's Robert.
I don't like how weak he is for a boy.
Robert doesn't like that Brian prefers studying at home to playing outside. Lately, with the availability of tablets for studying, he often scolds Brian for fiddling with one in the corner of the room.
If you keep messing with that thing inside all the time, you'll become stupid.
And then Robert tried to forcibly take the tablet away from Brian.
Times are different now. Brian is studying with it.
You can't learn anything from a piece of junk like that.
It's the same as the smartphones you use. Besides, when I was a kid, you told me to stay inside and study all the time. But now you want Brian to go outside and play?
Apparently, Robert used to force James to stay inside and study when he was young. Of course, it's not good for Brian to use the tablet all the time. But Brian also plays outside with his friends a lot. However, there are no kids around James' parents' house for Brian to play with, and they don't have a yard, so he prioritizes studying instead.
I'm really sorry. My parents don't approve of me marrying you, Mary.
Apparently, Emily and Robert wanted James to marry another woman. This woman is an old childhood friend of James and the daughter of a fairly well-known company president in their hometown.
She's liked James since they were kids, and now he's settled down with a woman like Mary.
Enough. I love Mary and Brian with all my heart. Please, stop disappointing me.
Because of this, we gradually distanced ourselves from Emily and Robert and rarely visit their house now. However, sometimes Emily and Robert show up unannounced or wait for Brian on his way home from school.
If Mom and Dad come, just ignore them.
I work from home and am usually there. Emily and Robert know this, so even if I pretend not to be home, they bang on the door and shout, causing a lot of stress. Once, the neighbors called the police because of the commotion, so they don't stay long and leave quickly. Because of this, I always ignore them. Why are they so obsessed? To be safe, I accompany Brian to and from school, keeping an eye out for Emily and Robert. My parents are also concerned, so nothing serious has happened so far. However, it's only natural to worry.
Maybe we should move closer to Mary's parents.
That suggestion from James made us seriously consider moving. The expenses involved in moving are a bit painful, but if it means we can feel safe, we're spending our days looking for a new home. One day, I got a call from an unknown number on my cell phone. Is it someone from work? At first, I was wary of the unfamiliar number, but since it kept calling, I decided to answer. Hello.
Finally, you answered. Took you long enough, you idiot.
The woman's voice insulted me as soon as I picked up. I frowned, wondering if I should hang up. Who is this? If you have no business with me, I'm hanging up.
Wow, how rude. I'm Laura Smith, James' future wife.
What? What is she talking about? I considered hanging up again. If this is a prank, I'm going to hang up.
It's not a prank. I'm James' childhood friend and his future wife.
Her words made me remember that James had a childhood friend named Laura.
Laura is selfish and not my type at all.
James had told me before. Could this Laura on the phone be that childhood friend? If so, why is she calling me? I fell silent, pondering this.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What about you, his childhood friend?
It's obvious, isn't it? James is mine. Just break up with him now.
Even over the phone, her voice was condescending. How much does this woman look down on me? Sorry, but I refuse. James and I love each other.
That's only for now. He's just playing around before marrying me. Don't get cocky.
No wonder James doesn't like her. Laura is impossible to reason with. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm at work. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. After that, she kept calling, but I ignored her. Eventually, she seemed to give up and my phone went silent.
Let's see how long you can keep working against the mighty Smith Group.
But then Laura sent that message. The Smith Group. I had a bad feeling. Could it be that Smith Group? The Smith Group is a major company that operates multiple restaurants. The CEO's name is indeed Richard Smith, so Laura might be telling the truth. That Smith Group. I also have business connections with the Smith Group. Moreover, they are one of James's business partners. I need to talk to James about this right away. I quickly told James about Laura's call when he got home from work. He was visibly shocked.
No way, Laura.
James, are you okay? Seeing James so clearly shaken, I asked with concern. He snapped out of it and shook his head.
I'm fine. Leave Laura to me.
He smiled to reassure me. Despite having a bad feeling, I decided to leave it to him as usual. All right, I'll leave it to you. James smiled, relieved. Whenever something happened, James always took care of it. So, I left it to him this time too, but I would later come to regret it.
Is Dad going to be late again today?
Looks like it. From the next day, James started coming home late. He said it was because of overtime during the busy season, but given the timing, it might have something to do with Laura. However, since James didn't tell me anything, I could only worry and wait.
I hope he comes home early.
Me too. I nodded at Brian's words, wishing for our lives to return to normal. A year later, things changed. What? What are you saying?
Laura is pregnant with my child. So, I need you to divorce me.
James said this with a blank expression. I couldn't believe what he was saying and just stared at his face.
My decision is final. I'll give you custody and the house, Mary.
Don't be ridiculous. The house we live in now is the new home we had been considering. After nearly a year of deliberation, we finally decided on this house, which is filled with our dreams and ideals. There's no way that James I know would give up on this house and our precious son Brian so easily. Think it over. Tell me the truth. So I pressed James for answers. But he didn't respond or even look me in the eye. I won't sign the divorce papers until you tell me the truth.
I see. Then I'll go back to my parents' house.
After that, James never returned to our new home and started living with his parents. Emily and Robert were overjoyed. They called me every day saying, just get divorced and let James go. Still, I was determined not to separate until I knew the truth.
Mary, you need to give up on him.
But things changed when my parents agreed with the divorce. Until then, my parents had supported me and believed in James with me, but suddenly they changed their minds. Why, even you? I don't understand.
Please, Mary. We don't want you to be unhappy.
Persuaded by my parents, I chose to divorce James. I'm sorry, Brian. We can't live with your dad anymore,
I see.
Brian said, looking somewhat sad. Fortunately, my income is enough for the two of us to live comfortably. And my parents will surely help us too.
I'll be fine. I'm okay with just you, Mom.
I hugged Brian as he said that with a smile. I have to be strong for Brian. Before the divorce, I want to talk with you again.
All right. I'll come back home for that.
I decided to meet James one last time. You look a bit worn out.
Yeah, I've been busy.
James, who I hadn't seen in a while, looked exhausted and sighed repeatedly.
As I said before, I'll give you the house and custody.
So, you can so easily abandon Brian? James looked momentarily conflicted at my words. But quickly, he became expressionless again.
I have another child now.
Is that child with Laura? This time, James averted his eyes. The James I know never looks away when speaking seriously. Is the James I loved really gone now? So, you don't need us anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Finally, James looked at me.
Laura is the only one for me now. So, please divorce me.
James said this with a serious expression. I couldn't respond to him right away. I wanted him to come back and not leave us. That's how much I still loved James. I see. I understand. Those were the only words I could manage to say. And so we got divorced.
Mom, don't worry about anything. I'll protect you in Dad's place.
Thank you, Brian. Brian comforted me when I was feeling down. I don't need James anymore. As long as I have Brian, I'll be fine. I'm fine too. I'll make sure you're happy, Brian. I hugged him tightly. And so, I chose to walk a different path from James. From then on, I started living with Brian, just the two of us. What? Why now? Then, out of the blue, I received a letter from James, who had chosen Laura. He had passed away in a car accident a month ago.
James was hit and killed in a hit-and-run accident.
My dad informed me. I felt deep sadness when I heard the news. Even though I was the one who decided on the divorce, part of me still loved him. But he chose Laura over me. That's why I didn't attend the funeral. Why is it from James? Still, I received a letter from him, and I decided to read it with suspicion.
I truly regret what I did to you and Brian. I'm really sorry.
The letter began with an apology. The familiar handwriting brought back memories, and I felt tears welling up. I continued reading. What? I couldn't help but speak out loud.
If something happens to me,
What was written in the letter was shocking to me. This can't be. It can't be true. By the time I finished reading, I was trembling. Then I made a decision. I understand your feelings, but this is different. I muttered to myself and decided to take action immediately. I'll never forgive them. I won't lose. With a strong resolve, I decided to move forward. I'm Mary, James' wife. I'd like to meet with Richard, please. My first destination was the headquarters of the Smith Group. I approached the reception and asked to see the CEO, Richard.
So, you're Mary. My condolences about James.
Thank you, but I received this recently. I handed Richard the letter from James. After reading its contents, he nodded.
Everything written here is true.
So, James,
Yes. He never betrayed you or your son.
hearing those words clearly, I felt tears welling up again. Seeing my reaction, Richard stood up.
I am truly sorry for what happened.
And then he apologized to me. How could someone as sincere as him have raised a woman like Laura? I thought as I looked at Richard. No matter how much you apologize, he won't come back. If only you had acknowledged it sooner.
For that, I must also apologize to you. although we haven't gathered all the evidence yet.
Richard then said something even more shocking. I knew it. I understand. I don't intend to blame you for this, but please cooperate with me. I need you to bring me that evidence.
Of course, I will definitely gather the evidence.
With a firm promise from Richard, I began to prepare. I will definitely clear James's name for the sake of Brian and our true happiness. Just you wait, Laura and Emily and Robert. 3 days after meeting Richard, I had gathered enough evidence and went to Emily and Robert's house.
I'll be right here with you.
Yes, please do. Leaving Brian with my mom, who was waiting at home, I rang their doorbell with my dad.
Hello, who is it?
The woman who appeared was heavily made up and dressed flamboyantly. Well, this must be Laura. This is the woman who took James from me. Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, and this is my dad.
What? Are you that Mary?
Laura stared at my dad and me.
What do you want? This house is mine now.
I came to talk about something important. It's pitiful that you had to leave your mansion and live in a place like this, I said with a smile, watching Laura's face turn red with anger. In reality, when Richard learned about James, he kicked her out of the house and disowned her. That's why she's reluctantly living in this ordinary, inconvenient house.
Don't get cocky. You were the one who got dumped.
I have a lot to talk about, including that. Can we come in?
My dad said calmly, and she let us in reluctantly.
Oh, here comes the loser.
What do you want now?
Emily and Robert were also there, and they looked at me suspiciously. I smiled at them. I came to talk about James. Now it's time to fight back. I'll make them regret their actions. Recently, I received a letter from James.
What?
A letter from James.
I handed them the letter I had shown Richard. At first, their faces were skeptical, but as they read, their expressions changed. Did you ever think a letter revealing the truth would reach me after James' death? The letter detailed their wrongdoings. You pressured James to marry Laura in every possible way. Knowing that Laura still had feelings for James, Emily and Richard decided that marrying the daughter of the Smith Group's CEO would benefit them. So they pressured James into marrying her. The letter says, "Every day my parents call and tell me to marry Laura. It's affecting my work, and everyone around me gives me cold looks." They called him day and night, and if he didn't answer, they even contacted his workplace. As a result, James always felt ostracized. Even so, James kept refusing your demands, saying, "The only ones I love are Mary and Brian."
Frustrated by his resistance, you resorted to drastic measures.
My dad, who James had confided in before his death, glared at Emily and Robert and said, "James persuaded my parents to encourage me to divorce him because he didn't want to involve me in the mess. That's why my dad was now standing by my side, helping to reveal the truth."
You told James, "I've given up on asking you to divorce. Let's drink together as a family," and called him to your house.
James was wary but decided to give them one last chance, thinking that if anything happened, he would cut ties for good. Emily and Robert made James drink heavily until he was completely intoxicated. Once James was thoroughly drunk, you called Laura over and created a compromising situation. James had no memory of the incident, but the fact that he had spent the night with Laura pushed him to the brink. He decided to divorce me, believing he couldn't escape them, and didn't want to drag us into the mess.
What you didn't expect was that Richard, upon learning the truth, would disown Laura.
After being kicked out of her home, Laura stayed in this house. She planned to live off James' earnings, but then he tragically died in an accident. You pushed your son, James, to the edge for your own gain.
You are not parents. You should be ashamed.
My dad shouted, and Emily and Robert flinched and lowered their heads.
So what? The fact is, James chose me.
Yes, because you said you were pregnant. As I spoke, I glanced at Laura's belly. There was no sign of pregnancy, making it doubtful if she was really expecting. It seems you used some pretty nasty tactics to get James. Laura had used her position as the CEO's daughter to pressure the company where James worked. Being under the scrutiny of a major company made James even more of an outcast among his colleagues. On top of that, you stalked James after work. Every day, Laura would wait for James outside his office. To avoid her, James stayed late at work or took long detours, which is why he always came home late.
I was just expressing my feelings to James.
Your feelings, right? Did you want a man who wouldn't give in to you? Laura flinched at my words. James had realized how Laura felt about him, and he wrote about it in his letter. The letter said, "She thinks all men belong to her. She's only interested in me because I'm indifferent to her. There's no love there."
That's not true. I only ever loved James.
Oh, really? Then why do you have such a reputation for playing around? As I spoke, I showed Laura several photos. Each one showed her getting cozy with different men.
Well, that's you know.
And James told you, didn't he? I can't love someone who took away my happiness and might not even be carrying my child.
It's James' fault. Even when I confessed my feelings, he coldly pushed me away.
So, is that why you caused his accident?
At that moment, Richard's cold voice echoed through the room.
What? Why do I hear my dad's voice?
Laura looked around in confusion. Then she noticed the phone in my hand.
I heard from Mary that she was going to confront you today, so I asked her to let me join the call.
Dad, why did you kick me out?
It's only natural to kick out someone who destroys lives and becomes a criminal.
The voice over the phone was chillingly cold, not what one would expect from a father speaking to his daughter.
James had been consulting with me for some time. He was supposed to come to me with evidence of Laura's infidelity and the setup against him. On his way, he had the accident and never returned.
He got what he deserved for betraying me.
It's your fault. You pushed him into the street while he was waiting at the crosswalk.
Caught off guard, James didn't notice Laura and ended up stumbling into the street. He was then hit by a car in a hit and run, which took his life.
He was such a good man. Because of your selfishness, a precious life was lost.
How do you even know all this, Dad?
I was on the phone with James at the time.
James had called Richard to let him know he was on his way. That's how he learned about the accident over the phone and heard James saying, "Laura."
That's why, as a final act of atonement, I gathered evidence of your crimes.
Dad, you're betraying me too?
You were the one who broke our trust first.
And with that, the call ended.
Hey, Dad.
Laura continued to scream into the now silent phone. The evidence Richard mentioned is already with the police. It's only a matter of time before you're arrested.
No, it can't be.
Laura collapsed to her knees. As she did, the sound of a police siren approached. After that, Laura was successfully arrested and ended up behind bars.
I still have James's inheritance. With that, I can.
Sorry, but you won't be getting James' inheritance. Before she was taken away, Laura had been muttering to herself, and I smiled as I told her,
What? But I'm James's.
I am James's wife. We never filed the divorce papers. In fact, James had the signed divorce papers, but he never submitted them to the authorities.
I know I should free Mary, but I just can't bring myself to do it.
The divorce papers came with the letter. So James and I are still married. His inheritance will go to me and our son Brian. Neither you nor those toxic parents of his will get a penny, I declared, and she started screaming incoherently. As she tried to attack me, the police arrived and took Laura away.
Mary, we were threatened by her too.
Yes, Laura forced us to intervene between her and James.
Seeing Laura taken away, Emily and Robert tried to cozy up to me. I glared at them. Because of you, I lost my beloved husband, and Brian lost his only father. You betrayed James, who trusted you as his parents and wanted to take care of you until the end.
That's right. Brian is our grandson and James' only living legacy.
At Robert's sudden outburst, I cast a cold glance his way.
Brian is James' only blood relative. So, give him to us.
Yes, Brian is our grandson.
I understood their motives. They wanted to take Brian, claim James' inheritance, and ensure someone took care of them in their old age. There's no way I'm handing over my precious child with James to you.
That's right. Brian is not a tool for your convenience.
We shouted back at them and left the house. Later, I heard through the grapevine that the neighbors started paying attention to their house because of the police visit. Also, our argument was overheard, and they became the subject of everyone's scorn. Those two were already notorious for being a troublesome couple, and this incident made them the constant subject of whispered gossip. What they did to James has come back to haunt them.
Mom, did you say something?
Oh, nothing. I was just thinking about what to make for dinner tonight. Those people don't matter anymore. From now on, I'll live for Brian, I decided, stroking Brian's head. After her release, Laura sought help from Emily and Robert.
But they refused to take her in. They had a huge argument at the doorstep, and she was left out in the cold.
Laura, kicked out by both them and her own family, disappeared into the night. Well, she's attractive enough, so hopefully she'll work hard to pay me the alimony. Turns out she wasn't even pregnant. I'm relieved there's no child to suffer. Emily and Robert, after causing another commotion, sold their house and moved. Later, my dad hired a detective to investigate them.
They caused trouble in their new place too, and caught the attention of some dangerous people. Those two will never find happiness.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Knowing the fate of the villains, I felt a deep sense of relief. A few years later,
I'm off.
have a good day. Don't be too late.
I know.
I smiled as I saw Brian off to school. Brian has grown and is now in high school. He still loves studying and has grown into a kind young man who cares about me.
Dad made me promise to take care of you if anything ever happened.
When he started middle school, Brian told me that. Before I separated from James, Brian had a long talk with him.
If I'm not around, take care of your mom.
That's what James told Brian.
So I decided to protect you for Dad's sake too.
Seeing Brian smile as he spoke, I remembered James' letter.
If I can never return to Mary and Brian, I want you to live happily and forget about me. Don't seek revenge.
James always cared about us until the end. I wasn't able to fulfill his final wish of not seeking revenge. But I don't regret my actions. Because of them, we have our current happiness. I feel at peace. My parents still help us, and Richard also supports us financially, perhaps out of guilt.
Actually, I've been learning about business from Richard.
Oh, really?
My dream is to take over his company someday.
Brian spoke about his future with a smile. I plan to watch over him warmly. Please watch over us too, James. I spoke to the photo in the living room. In the picture, James smiled, and I felt like he gently nodded in agreement.